We're now going to have the Hueneme High School Naval Junior ROTC cadets present the colors. Master Chief Jim Daniels will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in saluting our great flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Fort Hueneme and Oxnard will, I guess they'll sing the national anthem. Right up here, huh? Okay. Let the choral group get back to their seats. Now Lieutenant Victor Stevens will give the invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty and eternal God, from whose love we cannot be hear our prayers and our thanksgiving for all those whom we remember here this hallowed day. As we gather here this day, our hearts are of friends and of gather to remember those who fell in battle, and those, while they did not die, offered their bodies, their minds, their hearts, and their energies to fighting for peace and for liberty. We ask, Lord, that you would grace us with your presence here this day, and that you would help us in our pain, that you would hear our prayers, and that you have regard for our thoughts here this day. In this place, O Lord, we give recognition to the Spirit that made our country great, endowing fellow citizens with the willingness to give with the totality of themselves unto even death. And from this great blessing, and this great blessing that has been demonstrated, and this great blessing which is a fabric and a part of this country that we live in, we give you thanks. Bless us, and bless all those who have given the best of themselves for our country. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Retire the colors.
Harry! Coming! Ready! Cut! Right! Face! Forward! March! Left! 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 Right! 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 Left! Hold on! Out! Left!
Please be seated. For those of you who have been here for each of our Memorial Day ceremonies, I think this is the fourth one. When you get old and creaky like I am, you can't remember beyond 3. This is the third one. One of the individuals that's been here every time is Lieutenant Stevens, the chaplain. And this is his last one on this tour. He's leaving this summer, going from God's country to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina with the Marines. I think that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. I would like to introduce in the audience, I think this was done based upon shoe size. It's certainly not in any order of rank or importance. But since he runs around carrying a gun, we want to introduce Chief Andrew Salinas, Chief of Police of Port Hueneme. Councilman Stephen Gama. Jess Herrera, the Oxnard Harbor District. Rod Butler, City Manager. Stephen Kinney. There he is. Now we gotta take care of our condolence to the Air Force, I guess, and introduce Tony Vellante, mostly as the former mayor of Port Hueneme. Sylvia Munoz Snop, City Council. Laura Hernandez. And Tracy Phillips, the Chamber of Commerce. As we were attempting to catch names as folks came in, oops, I missed Jonathan. Shouldn't let him sit in the front row. It's too close to see who the heck is there. Almost easier to have the 6 people who aren't considered VIPs in this town stand up, and everybody else would just stay seated. But we're delighted to have all of you here. Everybody in this town is a VIP, that's for sure. I now would like to introduce the mayor, Will Berg, to give the official welcome.
Good morning and welcome here on this beautiful, again, Chamber of Commerce morning, eh, Tracy?
Great.
Isn't it special? We appreciate you joining us here. This is a really important day for Americans, for the country. And I'd like to share with you the thoughts from Lieutenant General John Kelly. Kelly was recently Donald Trump's chief of staff from 2017 to 2019. But back in April of 2008, Kelly was the commander of all the U.S. and Iraqi forces in Iraq. During that time, there were 2 Marine infantry battalions that were switching out in the city of Ramadi. One battalion in the closing days of their deployment was pretty soon going home, and the other was just starting its 7-month combat tour. 2 Marines, Corporal Jonathan Yale and Lance Corporal Jordan Harder, 22 and 20 years old respectively. Each one was from one of the battalions that was coming in. And they were assuming the watch together at the entrance gate of an outpost that contained a makeshift barracks, housing a little over 50 Marines and about 100 Iraqi police allies who were in the fight against the terrorists in Ramadi. Ramadi at that time was probably the most dangerous city in the world, and it was owned by a group called Al-Qaeda. Yale was a dirt poor mixed-race kid from Virginia with a wife and a daughter, a mother, and a sister who all lived with him as well. He did this on less than $23,000 a year salary. Hayter, on the other hand, was a middle-class white kid from Long Island. Now, these two came from completely different worlds. Had they not joined the Marines, they likely would never have met each other and never had an opportunity to run into each other or to understand the multiple Americas that existed simultaneously depending on one's education, on their economic status, or where they might have been born. But they were Marines. They were combat Marines, forged in the same melting pot of Marine training. Because of this bond, they were brothers, as close, maybe even closer, as any other brothers could be. The mission orders that they had received from their sergeant squad leader probably went something like, "Okay, you 2 clowns, stand post. Don't let any unauthorized personnel or vehicles pass. You clear?" So Kelly was also sure that Yale and Hayter probably rolled their eyes saying, "Yeah, Sergeant, this isn't our first rodeo. We got the point. And no kidding, sweetheart, we can do this." Then they relieved the 2 other Marines on watch and took up their post at the entry control point of Joint Security Station Nasser in the Sofia section of Ramadi and Anbar Province, Iraq. And it wasn't but a few minutes later that a large blue truck turned down the alleyway, headed right for them, approximately 60 to 70 yards away. And as it sped its way through the serpentine of concrete Jersey walls, the truck stopped just short of where the 2 were posted, detonated, killing them both catastrophically. The explosion destroyed 24 brick masonry houses, a mosque that was 100 yards away, collapsed, and the truck's engine came to rest about 200 yards away, knocking most of the house down before it stopped. Later, explosive experts reckon that there was probably about 2,000 pounds of explosives loaded in that truck. The 2 died, and because these 2 young Marines just didn't have it in their DNA to run from danger, they saved 150 of their Iraqi and American brothers in arms. When General Kelly read the report about this, a few hours after it had happened, he called the regimental commander for details, as something about this struck him as, well, just different. Marines dying or being seriously wounded is commonplace in combat. Regardless of rank or military occupation specialty, Marines are expected to stand their ground and do their duty and even die in the process if that's what the mission takes. But for some reason, this one just seemed a little different. The regimental commander, who had just returned from the site, agreed with Kelly, but reported that there were no American witnesses to the event, and that's important, just Iraqi police. Kelly figured if there was any chance of finding out what actually happened, and if there was any chance of decorating the 2 Marines in acknowledgement of their courage, that he'd have to do it as a combat award, and that requires 2 eyewitnesses. They also figured that the bureaucrats back in Washington would never buy Iraqi statements. So, if it had any chance at all, It had to come under the signature of a general officer. So Kelly traveled to Ramadi the very next day. He spoke individually with a half dozen Iraqi police, all of whom told the same story. The blue truck turned down into the alley, immediately sped up as it made its way through the serpentine. They all said, quote, "We knew immediately what was going on," and as the two Marines began firing. The Iraqi police then related that some of them also fired, and then to a man ran for safety just before the explosion. They all survived. Many were injured and some seriously. One of the Iraqis elaborated, with tears welling up, saying, quote, "We ran like any normal man would run to save our lives." What he didn't know before, and what he learned at that very instant, is that Marines are not normal. Choking past the emotion, the Iraqi policeman said, "Sir, in the name of God, no sane man would have stood there and done what they did. No sane man. They saved us all." Well, Kelly didn't know at the time, and only learned a couple of days later, after he wrote a summary and submitted both Yale and Hartford posthumous Navy Crosses, was that one of the security cameras, damaged initially in the blast, recorded some of the suicide attack. And it happened exactly as the Iraqis had described it. It took exactly 6 seconds from when the truck entered the yard or the alleyway until it detonated. And he said you could watch the last 6 seconds of their young lives. Putting himself in their heads, Kelly supposed it took about a second for the two Marines to separately come to the exact same conclusion about what was going on as the truck came into view. Exactly, no time to talk it over or to call the sergeant to ask what they should do. Only enough time to think about what the sergeant told them to do only a few minutes before. Let no unauthorized personnel or vehicle pass. Two Marines had about 5 seconds left to live. It took maybe another 2 seconds for them to present their weapons, take aim, and open up. By this time, the truck was halfway through the barriers and was gaining speed the whole time. Here the recording shows a number of Iraqi policemen, some of whom had fired their AKs, now scattering like the normal and rational men that they were. Some running right past the Marines, who had 3 seconds to live. For about 2 seconds more, the recording shows the Marines' weapons firing nonstop. Truck's windshield was exploding into shards of glass as their rounds took it apart and tore into the body of the truck bomber who was trying to get past them to kill their brothers, American and Iraqi. Bedded down in the barracks, totally unaware of the fact that their lives at that moment depended entirely on two Marines standing their ground. If they had been aware, they would have known that they were safe. Because two Marines stood between them and a crazed suicide bomber. The recording shows the truck careening to a stop immediately in front of the two Marines. In all of the instantaneous violence, Yale and Harder never hesitated. By our reports and by the recording, they never stepped back. They never even started to step aside. They never even shifted their weight. With their feet spread shoulder width apart, they even leaned into the danger, firing as fast as they could work those weapons. By that time, they had only 1 second to live. The truck explodes, the camera goes blank, two young men go to their God. 6 seconds. That's not enough time to think about their families, their country, their flag, or about their lives or about their deaths. But it's more than enough time for two very brave young men to do their duty into eternity. This is the kind of people who are on watch all over the world for all of us here today. How blessed we are as a nation to have such men. These are our neighbors. They're our friends right down the street from where we gather today. In remembrance of so many heroes who gave their last ounce of devotion to sacrifice for all of us. So please, next time you spot a service member, supermarket, gas station, restaurants, wherever, we see them everywhere, every day, all the time. Please consider taking a moment to thank them for their service. Thank you.
Now please welcome Congresswoman Julia Brownlee from the California 26th District.
Good morning, everyone. It's delightful and I'm very honored to be here to share this very important occasion with you. And I just want to thank Larry Downing. Where's Larry? Thank you for everything that you do every single day, and particularly today on Memorial Day for our veterans. Oh, thank you, Larry. Thank you, thank you. On Memorial Day, we pay tribute to the brave individuals who made the ultimate sacrifice and lost their lives in defense of our nation, our values, our security, and our way of life. We forever remain in their debt, and their lives and legacy live on with each and every one of us. This year is of particular significance for remembering our fallen service members. On June 6, we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Normandy landings. As many of you know, D-Day, the largest seaborne invasion in our history, marked the loss of the German position in France and laid the foundation for the Allied victory on the Western Front. While the operation was one of the largest defeats to the Germans, the Allied troops lost the lives of so many brave patriots. Allied casualties on the first day alone, were at least 10,000 men, with over 4,000 who gave their lives. Next week, I'm proud to be able to join the President and congressional leaders to honor our fallen service members at the Normandy American Cemetery, in a cemetery commemorating the valor and service of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. As the war escalated back here at home in Ventura County, a coastal region with valuable oil fields and well-stocked military installations, many residents feared that their husbands and sons would not only be killed overseas, but that our enemies may indeed invade us. World War II transformed our region, and particularly the city of Port Hueneme. Soon after the war started, the Navy leased Point Mugu from a private family to conduct missile testing and Army combat training. At the time, Point Mugu was a fishing village used mainly by Japanese Americans who, we should note, were later imprisoned in internment camps. The port of Hueneme was a small deep-water port, but 3 months after Pearl Harbor, it was purchased by the Navy and began a massive expansion. Hueneme became key to the Navy's war operations in the Pacific, and that tradition continues today. Not only did World War II define a generation, it defined Ventura County. Naval Base Ventura County has played and continues to play a critical role in our nation's defense. Countless men and women from Ventura County have put their lives on the line to protect our nation, and Ventura County continues to be the proud home of over 40,000 veterans. Today, not only do we honor the memory of our fallen heroes, but we also express our gratitude to their loved ones who have also sacrificed so much. As the daughter, sister, and the niece of service members, I understand the depth of this sacrifice, and I am deeply grateful. While there is no way that we can ever fully repay the sacrifice our brave service members and their families make, we can be steadfast in keeping the sacred promise that we make to support and care for those who return home, as well as care for the families who have to take care of the families who the fallen have left behind. To the veterans who have joined us here today to honor the memory of their fallen brothers and sisters, I say to each and every one of you, thank you, and thank you for your service to our great country. And to the loved ones of the fallen, on behalf of a grateful community and country, I want to acknowledge and underscore the great sacrifices you have made. As your representative in Congress, I take no commitment more seriously than to continue to fight for all who have served in uniform and to ensure their sacrifice is honored not only today, but every day. And I thank you for the opportunity. God bless all of you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Now please welcome the California Assembly member, Jackie Irwin.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here today. I too want to thank Larry and everybody else who organized this wonderful celebration. I am honored to be the chair of the Assembly Veterans Committee, and I am serving my 5th year there. So we want to make sure that we are always of service, and many of you know Nancy Frawley. If I'm up in Sacramento, Nancy is very keen to help anybody that needs assistance with connecting to the services that they've earned. Today we come together to honor and remember those who gave their lives in service to our country. If I looked it up this morning, that was 1.2 million lives. 1.2 million people who never came home, whose fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers and children and friends will feel a void forever. And for those families, we are eternally grateful and want to say thank you. We all know somebody who has known someone. The modern thought of 6 degrees of separation in this area really becomes 2 or 3. How many of us here today have cried or felt emotion at a commercial or news story about a soldier coming home for a special birthday or graduation? A surprise that one would think is a very personal experience for the family involved, but because those who serve become our sons and daughters, they are our protectors. We have a vested interest in their welfare, and we become emotionally attached. We weep at those moments of pure joy as we push back thoughts of those who never return. This morning we honor and weep for those who did not make it home for one last embrace. It is devastating that in today's world, not only are our service members put in harm's way on the battlefield in times of war and confrontation, but those same brave men and women come back and still carry the creed to protect us all. This past year, at the tragic event in Thousand Oaks, forever known as the borderline shooting, a few who served our country lost their lives, again protecting us, this time at home. Their companions, who also served, fought alongside many of them to save friends and strangers. Still others who were veterans, whose daily duty it now is to protect and serve our community, answered the call that horrific night. I would like to honor the memory of those lives that were lost and to surround ourselves with thoughts of gratitude for those who stepped up and will forever have to live with the memory of a war at home. As I previously said, Memorial Day is a time to pause in quiet reflection and gratitude for those who have served since the dawn of civilization, those who have protected our rights and our freedoms, and in their service they have sacrificed beyond our imagination. To their loved ones, whether the loss was long ago or so recently that the hurt is raw, thank you, and please know that their sacrifice was never in vain and that they will never be forgotten. And to those that are here today that served our country, please accept our gratitude for everything you have done. Thank you very much.
Now Ventura County Supervisor Kelly Long.
Hueneme. The city is just amazing. It's a secret gem for all of you. I know you tell your friends don't come here because we love it, right? It has been an honor to represent the city of Port Hueneme the past 2.5 days as your board of supervisors. And I really want to appreciate the city, the Historical Museum, the Sea Cadets, the Navy League, the Junior ROTC programs for sponsoring this 3rd annual Memorial Day ceremony. As Americans, we all look forward to many holidays to celebrate and mark the passage of each year. And on all of these holidays, Memorial Day seems to be the most solemn. It's the day we honor our heroes. And as I prepared for this speech last night, and my kids are asleep safe, and my family members are safe, it takes a minute to just breathe and say thank you to those heroes, those that stepped forth and protected us, even when we didn't know it, and that aren't here today to celebrate with us, and our family members that were there. And they did it because they wanted to protect our future. And we are here to remember that. Now, more than 1 million men and women have died in the defense of the U.S. And since the first 95 Americans were killed in the Battle of Lexington and the Concord in 1775, those sons and daughters, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers gave their lives so that we can live in peace. Their willingness to put their lives on the line for us in the testimony that America stands firmly in its commitments to democracy and the freedom from tyranny. The names of those fallen heroes even reach the boundaries of this city with the names we see on our program today. I ask that we all keep their memories and those of their families in our hearts today. And as we leave here and we go on our day with our friends and families and have our barbecues and celebrate being together, that we remember those that are not here today. So God bless our veterans. God bless the United States of America. And God bless you. Thank you for being here today.
Now I'm glad to introduce Beverly Kelly, the daughter of Staff Sergeant Marvin Decker, who's remembering CB Petty Officer 2nd Class Robert Stephen.
I want to draw your attention to the poster that's right in front of our city sign. That is a poster that was used to announce the USS Stephen. So there's also a picture of him, and I want you to think about that when I'm giving my speech. Back in 1985, nearly 35 years ago, TWA Flight 847 regularly flew from Cairo to San Diego with stops in Athens, Boston, and Los Angeles. On the morning of Friday, June 14th, however, the plane was hijacked shortly after takeoff from Athens. The hijackers, Lebanese nationals alleged to have been members of the Shiite terrorist group Hezbollah, were seeking the release of 766 Lebanese and Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, 17 members of the Iraqi Shiite group responsible for the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, and a condemnation of the United States and Israel by the international community. When the terrorist list of ultimatums was ignored, however, they forced the TWA pilots to fly to Beirut, Lebanon, where the demands for fuel were also summarily denied. Among the 147 passengers was steelworker 2nd Class Robert Dean Stephan, along with fellow members of Underwater Construction Team 1, Jeffrey Ingalls, Tony Watson, Stuart Dahl, Kenneth Bowen, and Clinton Lee Suggs. The six were homeward bound after completing a repair assignment at Naval Communications Station, Nia Maki, Greece. The terrorists, having flipped through and confiscated all the passports, immediately targeted Stephan and his fellow divers. While the other members of his detachment were regularly beaten, Stephen, whose baby face, and you can see it there, made him appear even younger than his 23 years, was singled out and subjected to savage cruelty and torture. The hijackers' goal was to compel authorities in the tower to change their minds and send fuel after hearing Stepham's screams. However, Stetham would not scream. In fact, he remained absolutely silent, instead choosing to suffer intense agony, one, in order to ensure that TWA Flight 847 not only remained on the ground, but two, also provide the opportunity for a rescue to be accomplished. As a result of his refusal, Stepham's face and body were subjected to such brutality he could only be identified by his fingerprints. The pilot, who later asked about his impression of Stetham, replied, "He is the bravest man I've ever seen in my life." These words from Stepham's Bronze Star citation bear further witness. Petty Officer Stetham, who exhibited physical, moral, and emotional courage beyond extraordinary limits, endured a senseless and brutal beating at the hands of his fanatical captors. He drew on an unwavering inner strength and absorbed the punishment. The hijackers were infuriated by his refusal to succumb, a symbol to them of the strength of the United States of America, and in their cowardly desperation ultimately shot him to death. At that point, his lifeless body was thrown out on the tarmac. It should come as no surprise that Robert Dean Stetham, who was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, November 17, 1961, he came from a proud Navy family. His father, Richard Stetham, who retired from the Navy as a senior chief after 20 years, continued to work for the Navy in a civilian capacity. His mother, Patricia, who served in the Navy before raising her family, continued to work in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Services. His brother, Chief Bosun Mate Kenneth Stetham, was a Navy SEAL, and his other brother, Diver First Class Patrick Stetham, served on the underwater construction team for 10 years, the same unit which Robert served. Stetham joined the Navy shortly after graduation, reporting for duty on May 4, 1981. Attended recruit training in Great Lakes, Illinois, and served in an assignment as a steelworker at Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 62, which is homeported in Gulfport, Mississippi. After several deployments to Guam and Diego Garcia, Stetham attended dive school, became a second-class diver, and was assigned to Underwater Construction Team 1 in Virginia Beach. For his actions while held captive, Robert Dean Stetham was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star for Heroism, and the Prisoner of War Medal. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery near others who were also victims of international terror. In 1995, and that's where the poster came from, the Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer USS Stetham was commissioned in his honor right here in Port Hueneme. Also, among other entities named for Stetham, you'll find a headquarters building and a residential street on the base in Naval Base Ventura County. Robert Dean Stetham, we will never forget.
Next, Lieutenant Colonel Clay Cowgill, U.S. Air Force, retired, VFW.
And Beverly, you're entirely too hard to follow. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me. Before I came here this morning, I was at my VFW post. I was seeing off a work detail going to Santa Clara Cemetery in Oxnard to
place flags at the headstones of the veterans who rest there. It's a tradition of our local VFW post that dates back probably 50 years, even before my time, if you can believe that. The team we sent out this morning is going to be placing 650 flags. It's a small act of remembrance and honor, and it truly is, for them and for me, a labor of love. I am so proud of them. We get as many people involved in this activity as we can get. Not just VFW post members who have served in foreign wars, but they bring their friends, their neighbors, their kids, their grandkids. And we love it. It's especially great to get those younger people. After they've placed the flags and read some of those headstones, they can look back over the cemetery that's decorated with those flags as they begin to blow in the breeze. And at that point, some realization occurs. They begin to get a feel for what it costs to keep this republic over the generations. And the cemetery there is really a special place. It's got veterans from the Spanish-American War, with the most recent headstone being from a current war that's dated 2018. It's a small act in a small cemetery, but it's being repeated in many other cemeteries all across our country this morning. And it's a beautiful thing. And at nearly every local government center, virtually every city and town in the country, people are gathering for remembrance ceremonies just like this one. The fact that you all got up early on a day off and came here shows me you know the reason why this day has been set aside. So there's not much more I can tell you about why this day is sacred. I could talk about sacrifice and the cost of freedom, but those that went before me already did. And you already know those things, why you're here. But there are some people, and I think we all know a few, maybe, who think that Congress created this holiday so we could have a cool 3-day weekend to kick off our summer fun. Since we don't have to go to work, we don't have to go to school, we have an extra day to spend at the beach or the amusement park or wherever it is they go today. One thing they all have in common, they're not here. They likely won't give a second thought to why this day was really set aside. And I think of those people as uninitiated. Those are the people that most need to hear the words that are spoken here by today's speakers. They need an enlightenment. They need to have some ground rules set aside so they know what to do and what not to do on Memorial Day, some do's and don'ts, and help them realize what Memorial Day is and what Memorial Day isn't. I'd like to be able to present some ground rules to these people, so I'd like to have an audience with these people instead of, I like you guys, but you already know what this day's about and why we're here. But I'd like to present some ground rules to the uninitiated who think this is just another holiday. It's something really cool. We got an extra day off. And there's 8 ground rules, and they go really fast. And as I go through them, you're going to realize that you kind of know what they are, even though you might not realize you know what they are. So here we go. Ground rules for the uninitiated for Memorial Day. Rule number 1, don't wish me a happy Memorial Day. There's nothing happy about brave men and women dying. If I'm going to find happiness in today, it's going to be in acknowledging the legacy of liberty that those men and women bought for me and paid for it with their lives. Rule number 2, it's not meant to be a holiday as much as it's meant to be a remembrance. Number 3, if you want to feel the true meaning of Memorial Day, go to a national cemetery, not an amusement park. number 4. On Memorial Day, don't tell me how great your favorite sports star is. You have 364 other days to tell me about that. Tell me about Chesty Puller, George Patton, Dakota Meyer, Mitchell Page, Ira Hayes, Chris Kyle, and many other heroes too numerous to name. Then I'll be listening to you. Number 5, don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. I've handed a folded flag to a veteran's widow, and I've known warriors who now stand their post with God. Number 6, say a prayer, and then say a few more. Number 7, remember the fallen for all the good they did while they were here. And number 8 kind of sounds like a rule of engagement for Veterans Day rather than Memorial Day, but I think it's a rule that should be a rule for every day. Reach out and let a veteran know you're there and you appreciate them. We're losing too many in peace. 22 a day to suicide still, and that's preventable. It causes my VFW team each year to have to place more and more flags at that cemetery. Reach out. Let them know you love them. You're there. Those are my 8 ground rules for Memorial Day for the uninitiated. Now, I really don't expect that you guys are going to remember all those 8 rules, but if you remember 1 or 2, you're going to make me really happy. If you find an opportunity to share some of them with someone who might need a little reminding or a little more education, you will make my day. So in closing, I want to say thank you for being here today, and thank you for being part of the initiated. God bless all of you, and may God bless America. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to introduce Sergeant Brian O'Sullivan, U.S. Marine Corps retired.
Good morning. My name is Brian O'Sullivan. I'm a retired Marine Infantry Sergeant. And the story that the mayor talked about there in Ramadi, my son was at that base. And those Marines probably saved his life. And I know kind of what those Marines were thinking at the last seconds of their life. And that's those last seconds there. I know out of their peripheral vision they could see each other. And they were saying in their heads, I'm not moving if you're not moving. Do your job. And that's exactly what they did to the end. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. It's a very important day. I'd like to thank Larry from the Port Winnie Museum for inviting me out to speak today. And it's a great honor to be here. It was about 2 months ago, I was sitting having a cup of coffee with Larry and several of the guys that we do almost every morning. And I was looking at Larry, and he had a grin on his face, and I could see the gears turning. I knew he was up to something, and he laid it on me because, how would you like to speak on Memorial Day? It took me about a minute. Yes, I'd like to do that. About 30 minutes later, I was thinking, what have I got myself into? But I knew it would be all right. This is going to help me, and hopefully it helps a lot of other veterans and families. I'm in kind of a Memorial Day rut. And got a Veterans Day rut, too, I get into, where I get up in the morning, I'm going to get out and do stuff. But after a couple hours of doing a couple things around the house, I'm not moving so fast. I start thinking, about my buddies, my teammates that are no longer here. And I start looking into, shoe boxes and photo albums of pictures of them. And it, emotionally, mentally, and physically wears me out. By the end of the day, I don't feel like doing anything. I very rarely leave the house. Last Veterans Day, I came out, helped set up chairs and that. That felt pretty good, but for the rest of the day, I really didn't do a whole lot. So getting out of that rut is very important. Getting out and speaking, getting out and seeing people, and hopefully it helps out a whole lot. I think it will. I have several buddies that do the same thing, and for many years, we really didn't talk about, our teammates that have been killed or, what we've gone through. And it's very hard to talk to the families because we still, see wives, sisters, brothers, moms, and dads, and it's, very hard, to communicate with people. And, I'm glad I'm out here doing this. I'm glad everybody is here. I talked to my 7-year-old granddaughter the day before yesterday, and I asked her if she knew what Memorial Day was, and she gave a very good answer. But it was the same answer that her dad would have given me, 20-some years ago when he and I talked about Memorial Day. And I asked her, did they tell you anything in school about Memorial Day? She said, not really. And that kind of upset me. There's in the speech here, being the third person in a group speaking, your speech kind of gets, torn apart. I don't want to talk about the same things. And we have our final speaker, and we kind of talked for a split second there, and I don't want to tear his speech up. So I'm going to kind of skip over the history of Memorial Day and kind of get into how I learned about Memorial Day when I was a kid. And I learned about Memorial Day and other very important holidays for this country in grade school, 4th and 5th grade. We would have speakers come, veterans, World War II, and I remember a Marine that was a veteran from World War II and Korea, and he scared the hell out of everybody in class. He had an arm missing, but he had the clamp. But that really stuck in our heads, and there was nobody talking during that class, and we were just all listening. And he explained the importance of Memorial Day, Veterans Day, the 4th of July, the Constitution. He went through everything. And every year we'd have that same thing, 4th and 5th grade. And then through high school, middle school and high school, you start having government classes and all that good stuff. So that was, my pretty much the introduction to Memorial Day in school. The way I really learned about it was because of a burnt foot. And this happened probably about 1978 or 79. Being from Indiana, the Indianapolis 500 on Sunday is a big thing. That Friday, everybody packs everything up in station wagons. We'd go up to my parents' beach house in Grand Beach, Michigan, which is right on Lake Michigan. And there had to be at least 40 or 50 kids there, cousins, aunts and uncles, everybody, friends, neighbors. And it was just a lot of goofing off. Friday, you get everything ready, you get up there, you call your spot. There's so many kids, you had to claim everything or you wouldn't get anything. And usually the bigger kids just booted you out of there anyway. Saturday was a lot of goofing off again. Sunday was the Indianapolis 500, cooking out, listening to the race, doing that, a lot of beach time and goofing off. Memorial Day Monday. The first thing that would happen on Memorial Day is my dad and my uncles would cook a big breakfast. And it was just kind of like a Las Vegas buffet. There was eggs and sausage, bacon, pancakes, orange juice, milk, everything. Little kids got to eat first. And when you're 9 or 10 years old and you got, a dozen brothers and, cousins and everybody there hounding you, you eat very quick. Get cleaned up. You make it to the back door, and my mom would take suntan lotion or sunblock, smear it all over you so you didn't get sunburned, then she'd kick you outside and you're off. I would run down to the beach, down a huge flight of cement stairs, crossed a couple dunes, and try to get to the water where the old Hobie cats were at, so you could get a place on there. On my way to do that, it was like a bolt of lightning. I go down on the ground, I'm screaming my head off. About a second later, I'm scooped up, back up the dunes, up the stairs, and into the house. It was my dad. He came down there and grabbed me. I was sitting on the counter. My mom was bear hugging me from what I remember. My dad was scrubbing my foot out. I had stepped into a bonfire that someone had buried with sand, so it burnt my foot up. I was hollering, and I remember my dad saying, knock off the yelling. It's not doing anybody any good. So right then and there, that was the end of that. He scrubbed the foot out. Another thing I remember from that, sitting on the counter, looking down, it looked like a tool bag. It was green. It said us on it. I know it's U.S. now. But at that time, I was like, what's going on here? There was all kinds of bandages, and it looked, like tools. There's hemostats and clamps, scalpels, picks, several bottles and bandage and everything like that. and something I didn't know my dad could do. He was very mechanical and very smart, but he was working on my foot very quickly and getting all that crud out of there. A couple minutes later, it was bandaged up, had my foot above my head laying on the couch. The day was done for me. You don't get in Lake Michigan with so much as a hangnail because it will get infected, and by the end of the day, they'll probably be cutting it off because you got gangrene. So later on, I was packed up, put in a station wagon. My dad drove me home. We got back to the house, got situated there, and that was pretty much, the end for me. Keep your foot elevated, keep ice on it, and no goofing around. Where's the order? After that happened, I probably fell asleep, did something. I remember coming downstairs. It was very quiet. I didn't know where my dad was at, but I just had to follow the trail of dogs. We had a bunch of hounds, coon hounds and labs and things like that, and they were in the house. So I knew my mom wasn't home yet. And my dad used to let the dogs in the house. He was like, dogs or kids, he'd get the dogs. Listen better and never any trouble. So I made it past all the dogs, and I look into kind of like the the study of the den, and my dad's in there, and he's kind of talking to himself and kind of laughing, and he's quiet, and watched him for a minute, and he said, come on in here. So I sat down on the couch. He called it a Davenport, but it was a couch. So sat down next to him, and we started looking at photo albums. And, he was pretty quiet all the time, but he was pretty talkative, and it looked like he was out on a big camping trip. A bunch of his buddies, everybody had guns. There's tents, there's tanks, cannons, for one heck of a camping trip, and helicopters, and my dad working, with a lot of guys, and then he explained to me what he was doing, and that camping trip lasted from about, I'd say about 1963 until about 72 for him. And he was a corpsman in I Corps with the Marines. And it really put a hurt on him, but he explained a lot of things to me, and he asked me if I knew, what these photo albums and these guys represented. And I didn't know. I knew what Memorial Day was because this is Memorial Day right here. These men gave their lives so we could live the way we do and have the things we have. They sacrificed so we can do what we do. And you have to remember that. And when he was telling me this, he pointed to his head. He said, if they're in your memory, they will never die. Don't ever forget. I never forgot that. And, many years went by. Sometimes we were up in Michigan. Sometimes we went to go see the Indy 500. In 1986, I joined the Marine Corps and attended several Memorial Day ceremonies that, grand scale, Marine Corps bands, passer reviews, it's huge. Really opened my eyes up. Several deployments all over the world. And then about 1990, I'm laying several miles into Kuwait in a ditch. Had been there for a couple months, just observing. That was part of the job of a reconnaissance Marine at that time, sitting and watching. And it got really old because there's just hundreds of miles of sand and nothing. So we started, going a little farther into Kuwait, getting up to oil towns and stuff like that and seeing what was going on. We'd pull back and during the day and take it easy. Then out of nowhere, a young chaplain and a second lieutenant show up. And they were asking for me, at that time, I'm pretty sure I was a corporal. The sergeant yells out, get over here. I get over there and see what's going on. I mean, these guys are nice and clean. They came in a Humvee. And the chaplain says, you're going to go on emergency leave. What for? Your dad has cancer and he's going to die. All right, let's go. And it didn't quite come that quick because I was kind of torn. I've been out here for several months, and I've been with these guys for several years. I love my dad, but I know my dad would say, stay. But I went and got to my dad's side, and after a few weeks, he progressively got worse. He had cancer everywhere in his body, and it pretty much tore him up. He was a big man, probably about 6'3", about 225, 230 pounds, athletic. Didn't smoke, drank a little bit, but the cancer just came like that and just ate him up inside. When he passed away, he was probably about 110 pounds. I was able to lift him up, move him around his bed and that, and I had the night and morning watch. After the nurse left one morning, I was sitting next to him holding his hand and, squeezing his hand. He'd squeeze my hand back. And, I was looking in his eyes. He had like a gray blue eyes, real light colored. So he was squinting, and he took his finger and tapped on my head. And he didn't say anything. He wasn't talking at the time, but I knew what he meant. And I told him, I won't forget, ever. And a few hours later, he passed away. And, I was happy he passed because of the suffering he was going through. And, he didn't, he was, before this, he said, I'm pretty much done. I wish I could go quickly because I don't want to suffer and I don't want to put everybody else through this. But, there's other things we talked about in that. But his big thing was don't forget. And when he tapped on my head, I knew what he was talking about. And I won't forget. That's one reason I came out today. And I'm glad you're all here, too. You younger generation here, the cadets, make sure you get out there. Tell people about Memorial Day, what it really stands for. Because I'm not exactly sure what's going on with, schools and, the education system nowadays. But Memorial Day, Veterans Day, I think those are the two most important holidays this country celebrates. And that's it. Everyone here is very important. And, the families, thank you for your sacrifices. And thank you very much. Have a good day.
Now, I'm delighted to be able to introduce Master Chief Jim Daniels, U.S. Navy retired.
Thank you very much, Tom. I was asked to read this award that was presented to one of our heroes that is no longer with us. And it's a documented story of Joe George, an unsung hero of World War II. George was a crew member on the USS Vestal, which was moored alongside the sinking USS Arizona during the furious attack at Pearl Harbor. George, a boatswain second class, ignored orders to cast off from the Arizona. Instead, he threw a line to the burning ship, 6 remaining survivors, saving their lives. George passed away in 1996 without ever receiving official recognition of his action. But in 2017, the Navy awarded him the Bronze Star with V, device for valor, aboard the USS Arizona Memorial. And this was an award that the man earned. And where's our leader at? Larry? I want to thank Larry for putting a seat up here with my son's name on it. Because with his wounds and all, and he passed away afterwards. Thank you.
Our keynote speaker today is Captain Dave McAllister. And I look at these numbers. A 1995 graduate. I've got socks older than that. Of the University of Tennessee, but at least he got a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. Got the right kind of a degree anyway. He subsequently earned a master's degree and a master's in National Security and Strategic Studies from the Naval War College. He's had all kinds of typical assignments. was the operations officer of 1 CB Battalion, was the commanding officer of MCB 74, operated in Iraq. We won't go through all the rest of those, or we'll be here for lunch. But he is now the commanding officer of the Naval Construction Group 1. That's the head hooligan for all of the Pacific Seabees. So please welcome, well, he's a captain, but he's the Commodore of the Naval Construction Group 1, Captain Dave McAllister.
Hey, speaking of socks, I think those are the best socks in the house today. So, hey, good morning and welcome to today's ceremony. Thank you very much for attending and joining me to honor those service members and their families that have made the ultimate sacrifice for their country. I'd also like to thank the City of Port Hueneme Historical Museum, Sea Cadet Corps, Ben Morrell Battalion, Navy League, and Hueneme High Navy JRTC for putting on this wonderful event. I'd also like to thank the music behind the beautiful. A round of applause. I'd like to thank Congresswoman Brownlee and all the community leaders that are here today that have been recognized. I really appreciate your continued support for the community, for the entire community, and especially for the service members. And I continue to be amazed at the multiple times I've been stationed out here and the multiple types of events. You always have a sense of community. And it's from the leaders to the community themselves that have a true passion for their community, and the support that they give the service members is unimaginable. I'd like to thank everybody, Larry especially, for putting this on and bringing together us today to remember, to recognize, and to honor our fallen sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen, and any other services. As stated, I'm the commander of the Naval Construction Group 1, which is the Pacific Seabees. And I'd like to let you know that I've had the opportunity to serve alongside all the other services in many types of locations around the world and many types of operations. And you can be proud to know that the service members serving today, most of which weren't born back at 9/11, and most that volunteered to serve their country after 9/11, they are some amazing men and women serving our country. And it is really impressive when you see, no matter what service it is, what they do or what they do to serve, the amazing individuals that we have. And the key part is that they volunteering to serve their country. They're volunteering to serve when they know they may go to conflict and they may end up having to give their lives to serve their country. While I've had the opportunity to serve around the world, unfortunately I've also had the opportunity to serve in units or supporting units where there's been individuals that have been lost. And that's what we're here to talk about today. The service members we honor today came from all walks of life. They shared several fundamental qualities. They possessed courage, pride, determination, selflessness, dedication, integrity, all the qualities needed to honorably serve a cause larger than oneself. And many of the stories we've heard already today really highlight those qualities that they've served. Many of these individuals volunteered, and many did not ask to leave their homes to fight on distant battlefields. Many didn't go to war because they loved fighting, but they were all called to be a part of something bigger than themselves, and they all did it honorably. There were ordinary people who responded in extraordinary ways in extreme times. They rose to the nation's call because they wanted to protect a nation which had given them and continues to give us so much. Since those first shots at Lexington and Concord began the Revolutionary War, and continuing until today, American men and women have been answering the nation's call and knowingly put themselves in harm's way. Millions of Americans have fought and died on the battlefield to defend our freedoms, and many of those who died were from this very community. Today, our service members continue to make this ultimate sacrifice And even as they lose a coworker, a peer, a friend, a family member, more step forward to volunteer and stand ready to serve. They follow in the footsteps of our forefathers and generations of fine Americans that have made this country what it is today. Memorial Day, originally called Decoration Day, arose from the ashes of the Civil War, where over 620,000 Americans, both Union and Confederate, have been killed and hundreds of thousands more maimed. Through the courses of that war, Americans attacked each other's lines with cannons, burned cities, towns on their own soil. Americans locked each other in prisoners of war camps and destroyed the railroads connecting north and south. Homes, schools, churches from Antietam to Vicksburg became riddled with bullet holes. The war's unprecedented carnage and destruction was on a scale not even imaginable a few years before, and it changed America's view of war forever. From those dark times, families came together, honored their dead, and began to burn a light of reconciliation. Although there's many different views of exactly how Memorial Day began, one story states that grieving families, both northern and southern, began decorating the graves of their lost soldiers with flowers and wreaths. In one Mississippi town, people decorated the graves not only of the Confederate troops, but also the Union troops, out of respect for the families of the Union soldiers and with the hope that someone would do the same for their lost loved ones in the North. These informal honors led to the first formal Memorial Day celebration in Waterloo, New York on March 5th, 1866, with Congress officially recognizing Memorial Day as a federal holiday in 1887. Since then, and with each passing year and subsequent conflict, we continue to honor our fallen service members. The heroes are countless, and the stories varied, but every story demonstrates an inner fortitude and gallantry that is unparalleled. We've awarded medals, added names to monuments, named bridges to honor these individuals for their bravery, their actions, and their sacrifice. But nothing, absolutely nothing, can ever replace the void left behind by a fallen service member. And no numbers of medals or ribbons can comfort the ones left behind. I recently had the opportunity to talk to a 100-year-old CV. And the thing that resonated with me as I talked to the individual was he talked about his brothers in arms. He talked about his friends. He talked about that partnership, how they fought together, and how individuals died. And how he wanted to continue to remember those he served with, both that lived and those that died. And that really resonated of a reason we need to continue to remember all those fallen service members. President Kennedy once said, "A nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by the men it honors, the men it remembers." And today, while we equally honor servicemen and women, the sentiment remains crystal clear, and a key component of our nation's greatness lies in our ability to honor and not forget those that gave their lives for you and I. Those that gave their lives for people they would never meet, and for those that may have had differing thoughts, beliefs, and ideals. Instead of just seeing a stone monument or a name as you look at cemeteries, I ask that on this special day in particular, but at all times, you see the faces of those who sacrificed their lives in defense of freedom. Commander Dwayne Wolf from this part of town sacrificed his life in Afghanistan. He enlisted in the Seabees, became a chief petty officer, was commissioned, and is currently the most senior civil engineer corps officer that was killed in time of conflict. Lieutenant Michael Murphy, his accomplishments are well known by many, ultimately resulting in the Medal of Honor. I was serving on a joint task force when the operation occurred where he was killed, and the task force stopped everything they were doing, gathered everybody in a small walled compound, and held a memorial immediately for all those that were lost in that operation. And that was to remind the other individuals on that team, on that task force, that were continuing to serve, that their job was to continue the effort so others did not have to give their lives, like Michael Murphy. Chief Petty Officer Joel Baldwin was a CB in Missoula supporting a task force. He died while shielding his co-workers from a mortar blast. I had the opportunity to talk to an individual that was sitting directly across the table from him when that mortar blast attacked. And the words I'll never forget are, "I am alive today because of Chief Baldwin." He is the only reason that individual's alive, was because of that individual. We've talked about the accomplishments of Petty Officer Steedham and how he gave his lives. Absolutely, I think you captured everything absolutely amazingly. The one thing I'd like to follow that up with, though, is the USS Steedham, still serving today. They're known as the Steelworkers. Everybody on that ship, when they are assigned to that ship, becomes a steelworker to honor Petty Officer Steedham. They have memorial on their quarterdeck, and they'll never forget what he did to give his life. So every single day when they operate that ship, they're remembering Petty Officer Steedham. To the countless young men who perished with their ships during the attacks on Pearl Harbor. The doctors, nurses who died while providing care amid chaos in every single conflict. Those that have died in every conflict this country is born cannot be forgotten. And even recently, the 34 individuals that have been killed since last Memorial Day, to include Senior Chief Cryptologic Technician Shannon Kemp, who was killed in a suicide bomb attack in Syria earlier this year. These are but a few of the brave service members that have given their lives, and we must never forget. It's also critical that we never forget those spouses, sons, daughters, mothers, and fathers that continue to live with a never-ending void. Joan Shields Bennett, the spouse of Petty Officer Marvin Shields, who gave his life defending his brothers in Dong Zai, Vietnam. She continues to honor his legacy and do it very proudly. She was down here last fall with the one of the culminating events that we do on the base, where we do a reenactment of that battle. She had the opportunity to speak to the upcoming Chief Petty Officers and talk about what Marvin Shields meant to her and what kind of person he was and how he gave his life willingly as he fought alongside his brothers in arms and gave his life. Britt Toner lost Lieutenant Junior Grade Frank Toner in Afghanistan when he recited to an insider attack. Lieutenant Junior Grade Toner was running, and there was an individual inside the line, something we don't expect to have, that immediately took fire on the individuals he was nearby with. And instead of immediately seeking coverage and safety, he charged the attacker to stop others from being killed. And in that, he ultimately lost his life. Let's not forget Phil and Debbie Sear, who lost their son Brandon when his aircraft crashed outside Kandahar. These family members that also paid the ultimate sacrifice, and that void will never be filled. As we look at the world events and the great power competition that's out there, unfortunately, if we go to war soon, it's going to be messy, and there's going to be loss of lives. But the one thing I am very confident of is our service members are ready and prepared to serve their country wherever and whenever they're called. They will stand strong, they will stand firm, and they will do what they need to do to continue to protect this great country. I ask that we remember and we learn from and strive every single day to honor these fallen, their families, and their legacy. It's phenomenal that we have a day set aside by our country to remember them. And more importantly, it's wonderful that we have a community that cares, that supports and chooses to celebrate and honor those fallen service members. Thank you again for your continued support of active and reserve service members. Thank you for your support to our family members. And thank you for the families of those that have fallen. That is a debt we truly can never repay. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Together, we will never forget those that have gone before us. And let us work together to never forget. God bless you, Thank you, and God bless the United States of America.
Chaplain Stevens will now give us the closing prayer.
Will you please stand with me as we pray? Dear Lord, we have come this day to commemorate and to honor life. We have come to remember life which is precious to us. It is within this contemplation that we seek your wisdom and provision regarding our choice of perspective. For Lord, we know that we might choose only to shed tears for the lives that we have discussed and those that have passed. But we also know that with your strength we might choose to smile because of these lives that have lived. Lord, help us as we feel the temptation to empty ourselves because we can no longer see those brave men and women that have gone before us and have now passed. But with your divine aid, allow our hearts to be filled with the love that was once shared with them. Those times spent laughing and loving. Those families that now have an empty place at their table, allow them to be filled with that love. Lord, we know that some might choose to turn their backs and live only in yesterday. But we know that with your benevolence, we might find happiness for tomorrow because of a yesterday spent with those brave men and women that have gone before us. Most of all, Lord, let us find comfort in your waiting arms. Allow us in this moment to be comforted in the knowledge that yes, our fellow service members have fallen. They have slipped the surly bonds of earth, but they have done so they might reach out and touch your face, O God. For this we do pray. In your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. This concludes the program. I thank all of you for coming and joining with us. I want to make a final thanks to the Sea Cadets, to the Hueneme High School Orchestra, the NJROTC unit for the Color Guard, and certainly to all of our distinguished guest speakers. And again, thank you kindly. Enjoy the day and drive safely.